Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this lecture series between Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and P2P, Prison to PhD lecture series. Today's series is called, the session today is called Centering the Voices of Formerly Incarcerated and Incarcerated People and the Leaders in the Movement. And today's sessions will explore how access to higher education can not only deter crime, but also have a rehabilitative effect, but also spark the kind of political and social awareness that leads to true freedom. Today on this discussion today, we have a keynote speaker, Dr. Stanley Andrisse, who's an assistant professor at Howard University College of Medicine. And we also have a panel discussion with two panelists, Dante Small and Majid Mohammed. And later after that, we'll have a short question and answer session towards the end of the session. So the first, we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Stanley Adries, who will introduce himself and talk a little bit more about his background.
So thank you, thank you. I will, if you give me one moment, I will pull up a slide, share my screen and pull up a slideshow here. All right. All right, so thank you for the introduction and welcome to the Centering the Voices of Formerly and Currently Incarcerated People and Leaders in the Movement lecture series, which is, as was just mentioned, jointly hosted by several departments at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and the Prison to Professionals nonprofit organization, for which I'm the co-founder and executive director. We have a very exciting and informative lecture series for you. The planning for this began 6 months ago, starting with a conversation between myself and Josh Sharfstein, the Vice Dean for Public Health and the former FDA Commissioner. I informed Dr. Sharfstein of the importance of centering our voices in the criminal legal system reform movement. Last year marked the centennial of women's suffrage movement. Who were the leading voices and faces of that movement? Women. Who were the leading voices and faces of the civil rights movement? Black individuals. What about the LGBTQ movement? People who identify as gay. So why then are formerly incarcerated people not the leading voices in the criminal legal system reform movement? You know who those voices are? I informed them that people like you. So Josh pointed me in the direction of Professor Lynn Rubenstein, and together we designed this exciting lecture series for you. So here are the speakers for the 3 lectures. All the speakers and panelists are formerly incarcerated individuals, and the moderators are Hopkins faculty or student. Today is the first lecture. I am the first speaker, and we'll have 2 additional events in the coming months. So I ask that you please mark your calendars. In addition to this being a lecture series, we will also have homework in a sense. Assignments are optional, but P2P will provide a paid internship for the top 3 essays. We would like you to draft a 1 to 3 page creative essay arguing the implementation of the laws and policies related to the lecture's topic. Today is education justice. Send that completed written assignment to info@prisonerpro.org. Our P2P policy team will review and rank the creative essays and select up to 3 individuals. More details are available in the lecture series booklet, which will be dropped in the chat. Also in the booklet are links to most of the studies that will be mentioned throughout all the lectures. And I also ask for you to please refer to the last page, which has a language matters section to productively engage in today's conversation. So today's lecture, as was mentioned, is titled Education over Incarceration. Here are some of my professional credentials, and more importantly, here are my organization's social handles. I encourage you to follow us and learn more about what we do. And most importantly, here are some cute Valentine's Day pictures of my 2-year-old daughter, Ashlyn Odette. So I need you to continue this conversation on your social media. I'm asking that you be bold. I'm asking that you start uncomfortable conversations. When you see this image on the screen, get your phones out, copy the text on the screen, or add your own wording, add or tag me and others that are in this conversation. And we've even included a few hashtags for you to potentially include. So please, we have to continue this conversation, and social media gives us a good platform for that. I also would note that this is being recorded and will be provided, but the lecture slides will not be made available. So if you'd like to, there'll be a lot of good information. Please take notes. There's also additional information within the booklet, as I was mentioning to you. So I want to start by using a audience response system. It's not within the Zoom, so I'm asking for you to follow the instructions on the screen. You can either go to the website that's listed there, the polev.com/Stanley Andri 621, or you can text that. You can text Stanley Andri 621 to 3607, and that will enable you to join this audience response system. So for all of our viewers, I'm asking you right now to do this live. And once you join in, once I see it is a live response, so please answer the question. The question is, what is the top priority for increasing access to education for currently and formerly incarcerated people? So you can pick A, B, C, or D, A, B, C, D, or E. And so I will wait for a few responses to come in. There we go. There we go. So we have some responses coming in. So the question again, hopefully you can all see it on your screen. What is the top priority for increasing access to education for currently and formerly incarcerated people? So I'll give it a few moments, and I'll tell you a little bit more about these different aspects as we move along the lecture. And it looks like for most people are selecting D, which is working with universities to implement college and prison programs. And second, I see ban the box on college applications. Next is working with the U.S. Department of Education to regulate college programming for currently and formerly incarcerated people. So we will thank you for those that are participating. I will give it another 15 seconds or so, and then we will close it out and we will move forward with the lecture. And we will talk a little bit more about this here in a second. All right. So thank you for participating. We'll touch on a lot of those topics here within the lecture. So in this nation of America, we incarcerate more people than any other nation in the entire world. 2.2 million of your fellow Americans are currently locked in cages. We incarcerate at a rate higher than most third world countries that have, to our standards, extremely heinous punishment systems. In fact, our closest competitors, as you can see on the screen by the red, places we consider communist to have backwards politics like Russia and China, we incarcerate 2 to 4 times as much as they do. The US accounts for only 5% of the world population, but 25% of people incarcerated around the globe are here in the US. 1/4 of people locked in cages are right here in this nation of America. So my name is Stanley Andrisse. I'm a formerly incarcerated person with 3 felony convictions, sentenced to 10 years in prison as a prior and persistent career criminal. I was once told by a prosecuting attorney that I had no hope for changing the decisions I had been making. I am now Dr. Stanley Andrisse, an endocrinologist scientist, professor at Howard University College of Medicine, formerly a faculty at Johns Hopkins Medicine, an affiliate faculty at Georgetown Medical Center. I'd say that I've probably changed a little bit from what this prosecutor was prophesizing those many years ago. Growing up in the Ferguson, Missouri area, I got involved with making poor decisions at a very young age. I started selling drugs at a very young age. I was arrested for the first time at 14 years old. By my early 20s, those poor decisions had exponentially multiplied, and I found myself sitting in front of a judge facing 20 years to life for drug trafficking charges. The prosecutor painted this picture of me being this dangerous career criminal. By this time, I had amassed a juvenile record and 3 felony convictions. She was successful in sentencing me as a prior and persistent career criminal. I'm now a professor at a medical school. I work with college scholars, 25 to 30 years plus, training to be doctors. It takes 16 plus years of higher education before we call them career professionals. Yet this prosecutor was prophesizing that I was a career criminal with no hope for change in my early 20s. The judge sentenced me to 10 years in a maximum security prison. So I want to step back a little bit. I was under investigation for 9 months leading up to a 50-man DEA drug raid. How many of you have ever had 50 assault rifles aimed at your head? I could have very easily been Mike Brown laying there dead in the streets, and all that would have been said was, "Up, just another young Black thug selling drugs, dead in the streets. Who really cares? Black lives don't matter, right?" When it was all said and done, they popped 5 of us. 3 of us were Black, 2 of us were white. Me and the other Black guys ended up in prison. The 2 white guys never stepped foot in a prison cell. I guess the prosecutor saw hope in their whiteness. I went into my incarceration just having been told that I was a career criminal. I internalized that. I believed it. I had this kind of hate towards this white lady, but you know, she was a person of authority. So I believed what she said. It's only now that I understand that the brain is not fully developed until the mid-20s. Adolescent young adult brains are very mendable, and mine had been mended. I was a career criminal. Thus, I went into prison maintaining that thought and fulfilling that prophecy. My mentor, however, who I met just before prison, saw a different narrative. He saw a different trajectory. He invested in my potential. My dad and I had fallen off as I was making these poor decisions. My dad's health just immediately plummeted while I was in prison. Piece by piece, they began amputating his lower limbs up into his torso. Before I could reconcile our relationship, he fell into a coma and lost his battle with type 2 diabetes. This was emotionally devastating, but I used this devastation as inspiration, and he remains my inspiration. It took me months to put together each application, but the rejection seemed to come in one after another, just rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. I applied to 6 programs. I was rejected from all but one, the one that my mentor was on the admissions committee for at St. Louis University. St. Louis University gave me a second chance. I've stared down some ill in my time, eye to eye. So, I had some grad student friends ask me, "Are you scared of like your dissertation committee?" And I'm just thinking like, nah, not really. I was ready for change. I was hungry for change. Upon release, I was accepted into St. Louis University's PhD program. I completed my PhD and MBA simultaneously in 4 years at the top of my class. Education was my game changer. We must understand where we came from to understand where we are going. New generation, same problem in a different format. Each generation has had legislation that has emboldened this problem that US has been facing for a very long time. Our forefathers grounded this nation through the blood of the Revolutionary War and built it upon breaking the backs of Black slaves. And from that, consecrated the Constitution from which we were founded. In that was a very firm understanding that slavery would be the driving industrial force and that whiteness was a blessing and bestowed power, privilege, and citizenship. The next generation was the Civil War era, where abolitionists were pinned against Confederate beliefs. The abolishing of slavery was replaced with Reconstruction laws that resulted in Jim Crow and segregation. This ensued for 2 generations, riddled with lynching and enforced by the Ku Klux Klan and government policies. The next generation and its biggest policy was the New Deal. The creation of things like FHA brought about things like redlining, and that brought generational wealth to some, white people, and generational poverty to others, Black folks. And again, this era was still riddled with lynchings. The Civil Rights era brought about changes like affirmative action, which sought to close this ginormous wealth gap that redlining, segregation, and Jim Crow had created for nearly 200 years now. Our generation, the sons and daughters and grandchildren of the civil rights movements, we face yet another descendant of our forefathers' vision, another descendant of this ever-evolving problem we have in our country. Mass incarceration. The problem has been documented by many scholars. The problem has changed from slavery to Reconstruction to Jim Crow to mass incarceration. So here are just a few points to that argument. Blacks born in the middle class in the 1960s withdrew to poverty at 3 times that of whites. Blacks making 100,000 live with whites making 300,000. An individual by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan in the 1970s stated that the Negro experience is like a diseased patient caught in a web of pathology. He suggested social aid, but President Nixon, who was his boss, suggested mass incarceration of primarily Black people. From 1970 to present, incarceration rose over 7-fold. Another key fact or point is that Blacks without any convictions have more difficulty getting a job than whites with convictions. Essentially, whites entangled in the system are actually caught in a web that was not intended for them. The creators of this system are essentially saying, tough luck, at least you're still white. 1 in 3 Black men will be incarcerated in their lifetime. Black males go to prison at a rate 6 times that of their white counterparts. That information is also the same for Black females compared to white females. Since the launch of the war on drugs with things like mandatory minimums and giving prosecutors the right to sentence people as career criminals, such as I was sentenced, incarceration has gone up nearly 800%. And the people primarily affected are people of color, Black and brown individuals. Furthermore, mass incarceration is a race issue. Non-poor people of color that are above the poverty line make up nearly more than the poor and non-poor white populations in prison. It's not just poor Black people going to prison. It's all Black people that are susceptible to going to prison. So I want to talk briefly about the school to prison pipeline and zero tolerance policies. From 2017 to 2018, students in foster care from pre-K to second grade were 3 times more likely to receive in-school suspension. So this data is from a Texas study, but similar numbers exist across the nation. Blacks made up 13% of the student population, but 33% of out-of-school suspensions and 25% in-school suspensions. Black girls were suspended 6 times more frequently than white girls, and use of zero tolerance punishments and criminalization policies were being used on 2- and 3-year-old Black babies. If I find out that the daycare teacher is criminalizing my 2-year-old daughter, it's seriously going to be some real problems. That's crazy. We are criminalizing babies. In high school, I lived in and out of school suspension. I was 1 suspension away from being expelled from the school. I escaped that because I was the high school's track star. I was considered a criminal in school way before I entered prison. So how did we get here? Again, I say we must understand where we came from to understand where we are going. So let's dive deeper into the history. Between 1525 and 1866, 12.5 million people were kidnapped from Africa in the transatlantic slave trade. Only 10.7 million survived this 2-month journey. We all know about this, right? To some extent. However, how American society remembers and teaches the horrors of slavery is very crucial. And to this day, most textbooks offer a very sanitized view of this history. It is up to us to change that about our American school system and what we teach. We supposedly rebuke slavery, yet we knowingly elect politicians that choose to enshrine this savagery. In the decade prior, American taxpayers contributed $40 million to maintain Confederate monuments. So systemic inequality is a word many are familiar with. It's led to racial, economic, and educational disparities that are deeply entrenched in all US institutions, including and maybe especially universities. Here are only just a few of these discriminatory policies. Of course, we can go on for a very long time, but things such as poll taxes for disenfranchised Black voters, marginalization of Black soldiers, Black inventors being barred from filing patents, white medical professionals exploiting Black women's bodies, the Loving's decade-long fight for interracial marriage, the Jim Crow era and segregation amongst American cities and schools. These are just a few of what could go on for a very long time. Beyond enslavement, beyond exploitation, and beyond inequality, Blacks have long been the targets of racially charged physical violence. The Equal Justice Initiative states that more than 4,400 lynchings took place in the US between the end of the Reconstruction era and World War II. So 4,400 Black soldiers or Black bodies have been lynched. The Senate only passed legislation declaring lynching a federal crime in 2018. Between 1918 and 2018, more than 200 anti-lynching bills failed because the politicians we elected didn't think that Black lives mattered. Incidents of Black bodies lying or hanging dead in the streets is not new to this country. Now that we've gone through a very quick collective understanding of where we came from, where do we go from here? We as a society need to collectively push for policies that increase access to education over policies that increase incarceration. The nonprofit I co-founded, From Prison Cells to PhD, helps currently and formerly incarcerated people obtain college education and reach their full potential. Higher education reduces recidivism. The numbers are very clear. 65 to 70% of people that step out of prison end up stepping back into prison within 5 years of release. Recidivism drops to 13% if a person obtains an associate's degree, to 5% with a bachelor's degree, and nearly eliminates the chances of going back to prison if a person gets a master's degree or higher. Education, additionally, is 4 to 5 times less costly than reincarcerating that person. Thus, education helps the individual and it costs society less. It's a no-brainer. So who needs to be leading these efforts? Formerly incarcerated leaders like myself and the others that you'll hear from throughout this lecture series. P2P and partners were awarded a $5.2 million NSF grant to promote STEM opportunities in prison settings. And FYI, that person in the corner, that's me walking out the bank with my NSF money bags. But more seriously though, historically, Black and brown individuals have not been included at the resources and funding table. Black and brown individuals make up over 30% of the population, yet only 6% of big money NIH grants. 6%, 94% went to white individuals. This is the money that is helping change our world, and it's all going to white people. Now imagine how many formerly incarcerated people are in that group. So where should our focus be? Roughly 90% of the general public has a GED or higher, compared to nearly 75% of formerly incarcerated people. That's a 1.2-fold difference. So looking at this graph, nearly 30% of the general public has a college degree compared to less than 4% of formerly incarcerated people. That's a 9-fold difference. It is very clear where our focus needs to be. Additionally, so this study looked at what are the chances of getting a college degree for formerly incarcerated persons. The general public has a 1 in 3 chance of getting a college degree. That's pretty good. A formerly incarcerated person has less than a 1 in 20 chance because of all the barriers that are in place. There's a lot of work to be done. This study, a recent publication by the Council of State Governments, laid out 4 key steps for states to improve access to higher education for people entangled in the criminal legal system. This is one of the studies that's included in the booklet and many more. So this has a lot of information I'll go through pretty quickly. But one was increasing the use of state and federal funding, which, looking at the green on the map, you can see only 17 states are tapping into these funds. Most DOCs and universities aren't aware they can tap into these funds. 2 was increasing the types and amounts of program offerings to match employment trends, i.e. more STEM programs and advanced degrees. The orange on the map shows 17 states are doing that. 3 was reducing restrictions and barriers to access, things like banning the box, as we talked about in the beginning. 4 was increasing incentives like reduced time for educational attainment and creating articulation agreements between DOCs and universities, and also increasing support, so increasing programs like what P2P does. So I have just a couple more slides before I pass it over to our panel. I was the keynote speaker in the National Conference of Higher Education in Prison in 2018. This conference draws close to about 1,000 people that are key in the field. Roughly half and half were formerly incarcerated and program leaders. I polled a crowd of about, a little less than 500 people. 82% of formerly incarcerated people felt the legal system was preventing them from pursuing their career of choice. So they're not doing what they innately think that they're good at. When I asked the program directors how many majors they were offering, 93% said 2 or less, and none are offering 4 or more. This is a problem. How many majors are offered on a regular college campus? And who's making these decisions? Most of the program leaders are white, non-formally incarcerated women. They're the ones, as we showed earlier, the ones getting the money. To match the fastest growing employment sectors, healthcare, information technology, and professional services, the next phase of higher education in and after prison has to include promoting higher degree attainment, like what we do at P2P, smooth transitions from in prison to outside programs, such as what P2P has done in our college pipeline creations, promoting degree attainment outside of the social sciences, like STEM ops, building coalitions and utilizing success stories to address licensure barriers, and moving to a model where the student can pursue their innate passions, like our P2P model. And I only have 2 slides left, so I'm about a minute or 2 over, but if you can bear with me, just a little bit more about our program. So P2P embodies all of these characteristics that I just mentioned. Our scholars are doing some amazing things. I almost kind of feel like it's this X-Men thing. If any of you guys are Marvel fans and know who Professor Xavier is in his school for gifted and talented, I feel like P2P has a school for gifted and talented individuals. The X in, so Professor Andrise's school for currently and formerly incarcerated people, the A-men and women, it almost follows kind of a similar logic. In the X-Men, society saw them as mutants, but Professor X saw them as gifted. Society has many negative labels for currently and formerly incarcerated people, but P2P sees gifts and talents. In a few moments, I'll be passing it over to a person I claim to be the first formerly incarcerated person who will land on Mars, and a computer scientist who will bring the next innovative communication technology to our hands. P2P uses an asset-based community development model where it's not about what's wrong, it's about what's strong. We identify a person's assets and their strengths and make them stronger by incorporating them into a network of social connections, resources, tools, and support. We do this by having an amazing team, lots of volunteers, all of our paid team members, 26 of them, 80 out of the 26 of them, 85% are formerly incarcerated or directly impacted. Out of all of our volunteers, most of them are formerly incarcerated as well. So with that, I will end, and P2P is definitely centering the voices of formerly and currently incarcerated people and leaders. I hope that I gave you a deeper appreciation of where we came from and a better understanding of where we're going. Thank you for your time. I encourage you to donate or get involved with P2P. You can check out the booklet for that information. Please, if you'd like to, complete the assignment for a chance at a P2P internship. And with that, I will pass it over to our moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Adries, for that wonderful presentation, very informative. We like to keep everything moving a little bit behind schedule, but I do want to introduce the next 2 panelists. That is Mr. Dante Small and Mr. Majid Mohammed. All right.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. How you doing? All right, so I'll be asking a question and for both of you to answer. So Dante, you will go first and then Majid will go second. So this first question is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and also your experiences with the legal educational system?
Sure. So my name is Dante Small. I'm originally from the Bronx, New York. I was incarcerated 6 months after high school for assault with a weapon. I was sentenced to 12 years. Going into that sentence, I was like keenly aware that, academically I struggled all around the board. I didn't perform the best in school, majority because I shifted around a lot. I went to like 5 different high schools and between 3 different states. So I didn't never get that, you know, that direct attention to really help me nurture my academic skills as I would have liked. So, you know, walking into that sentence, that was my goal, was to like really skill up and like challenge myself. But unfortunately, what I found was in the system that there was not a lot of programs that were going to get me there. So I, you know, engaged in a lot of self-study. I, you know, started to learn Spanish, you know, picked up the dictionary and tried to like read books. Uh, but given my shortcomings coming in, it really didn't like pan out. And it wasn't until educational program came into the institution called GPEP, which is Gaucho's Prison Education Partnership Program. To give more context to that program, this is a program that it's a division at Gaucho which provides men and women incarcerated in Maryland with the opportunity to pursue excellent college education. Its college is located in Towson, Maryland. And that, you know, that for me was like the moment that really changed my life, because I was really challenged with the educational the rigorousness of the courses and the material. Um, so I, you know, did all I could to like make it happen and push through. But the sad part about it was that it came while I was 4 years into my incarcerations. So I only had 2 more years. So by the time I was set up for release, which is in 2014, I only had 27 credits. But I was able to get back in contact with the director of the program, Amy Rosa, who connected me with people to help me through the apply for college. I started back up. As soon as I got off of, at that particular time, I was still on home monitoring. So I started back up college once I got off home monitoring, which I would say like was like 4 months after my release. Started at CCB Essex, which is located in Baltimore County. Did about a semester there, and then I was given the opportunity to actually apply for Goucher College, of which I pursued. Was able to get in, and initially I went in to major in sociology until I was you know, given a little nice nudge by my sister to give computer science course a shot. And I did, and I fell in love. And I actually switched my major to my minor and made computer science my major. And graduated in 2018, and I have since moved on and worked at 2 different technology firms. And today, you know, I look forward to innovating and bringing something new and something that would essentially really incorporate the voices of people that live in underserved communities.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. And I see you from the Bronx just like me, so it's a good place. All right. Majid, thank you for popping up. So the same question to you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your experiences in the legal educational system?
Yeah, absolutely. First, it's a pleasure to be here to talk with you guys. I think I could have a unique perspective because I started, or in totality, my criminal experience through the legal system has been at 2 different states, multiple different yards, and ended at a halfway house. And my higher education experience through each of those levels and steps have been drastically different. I started in study. I did 7 years between California, Colorado, and the halfway house. And I started at a level 3 yard in California, in which the higher education that was offered, although was offered, wasn't readily available or promoted in ways where you thought it was something that was easily accessible. They first of all, being on a level 3 yard is difficult enough. To add higher education, in which it's something that the institution feels is probably some extracurricular activity rather than a full-time job or something that they should be promoting, also makes it very difficult to or near impossible to actually utilize. So starting there, in which I did about like 2 years, I wasn't in higher education. I didn't think about higher education. I think I was in a vocation and did really more of a trade type of stuff at that higher yard. It was only when I went to the level 2 yard in California where I really thought that this higher education and being able to access or earn an associate's degree was something that was for me. And it was for multiple reasons. First, they had this entire dorm set up for people who are just in college. So the amount of collaboration, if you can imagine, in California, the higher education system for those who are incarcerated is through correspondence. At least it was when I was there. So the professor sends you a book and essentially material. You do that, you do your work and you mail it back, and then you get your grade. So you don't really have office hours. You don't have a computer, a laptop. You don't have the internet. You don't really have these things that we take for granted out here while we're pursuing higher education. So that collaborative environment at that level 2 yard was I think essential for my success. Another thing is they had a coordinator and people to really communicate to your professors on your behalf, and really the environment was set up for success. So I was able to earn an associate's degree while I was in California, and then I transitioned to Colorado, where they had no higher education. There was absolutely none available, and if it was through your own. It was through your own accord. So if you were able to afford a higher education, then you're able to access it. But there was no a principal or coordinator trying to make that journey easier. And I think that really it showed in my ability to really access higher education, but also in the environment as well, because I was on a level 2 yard in California as well, or in Colorado as well, and it just seemed like people my age who should be in class or focus on something were a little more wild and unable to really reinvent themselves and evolve out of that lifestyle essentially.
Thank you for that background. Appreciate it. And so, since I have you up, I'm gonna go with you. So Majid, tell us about what motivated you or inspired you to go into the STEM fields. For those who don't know, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired you or motivated you to go into that field?
Yeah, for sure. I have always been interested in STEM. It was never on the forefront of my mind until, for those of you know who have been incarcerated or know people who've been incarcerated, you're really not allowed out at night. So the yard usually shuts down. I was in county jail for a long time, so I really didn't see like the stars or these small things that we take for granted a lot for a really long time. And one night, I was able to move from my building to another building that a program was being held. Forgot what the program was. But I looked up and we're like the middle of nowhere, and there's just like feels like a 1,000 stars. And started asking questions in my head like, yo, you know, like how big is the universe? How where do stars come from? How do they form? How many of them are there? So these really like abstract questions on the fundamentals of physics, in which I just went to the library and started reading books and picking up books on physics and astronomy. And I think that's really what sparked my my interest in STEM is really understanding how it can explain a lot of the questions that we have that are bigger than just day-to-day questions. And,
Great, thank you so much. All right, Dante.
Yes.
All right,
And
great.
the question, I believe, is what inspired me to go into computer science.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also what programs have influenced your life during incarceration?
Sure. So Goucher College is a liberal arts college, and I say that because it exposed me to a broad spectrum of different courses. I would say like one course that really inspired me was a course that I least wanted to take. That was theater. Theater was a course I just didn't understand why we was taking it, why they would put that on our schedule. But once I got further into the course and I started to like get into the material and learn about different playwrights and like how much thought actually goes into the process of like creating a script and how they use silence and all these different like techniques that's used, I just really truly appreciated that course because that was something I would have never myself have chosen. Um, and it led me down a path to pursue sociology, which is like one of the my favorite topics to like actually read in and like stay current with like different studies that come out and whatever may be going on in the sociology world. Um, Beyond that, what drove me to computer science? As a kid, I just grew up loving technology. I was that kid that would run to the door at that particular time. Microsoft would always send their updates, a CD-ROM to your door, and you would have to go and load it up on a computer. So I was a kid to sit there literally hours and hours just uninstalling, reinstalling software and just looking at it. But that wasn't something that I ever had the opportunity to nurture that interest of mine because it wasn't just in my schools. I remember one particular time when I was in a high school in Florida, how excited I got just for getting into a typing class. I thought that, I was like on my way. But it was no follow up because I moved then to Baltimore. Um, so fast forward to my first introductory class into computer science. When I got in there and I was taking a stab at my first assignment, to me it was like, oh, this is all pattern matching, and it just like for me in the way my brain works, uh, I just obsessed over it. And then I just, was like at my college professor's door. I would say like every 5 minutes, like asking her, what can I do to get better at this? What else, what other supplemental material can you give me? What books, what resources? I just wanted to do whatever it took to accomplish getting that goal of getting that degree. And on the other side is that just growing up in New York and it's about hustle and bustle. Learning these skills for me was an opportunity for one to land a professional career, but in addition to that, to also become an entrepreneur and start my own business in the near future. So these were all the different factors that played into me wanting to actually go down that route.
Thank you for that insight and the background. Both of your stories are very interesting and very inspiring, especially going into the STEM field where, of course, Black and Brown people are underrepresented. So I commend you both for that because it's not an easy journey. So thank you both for that. Um, Dr. Adries, if you can come back on so we can have the question and answer session. All right, so we have some questions put in the chat, and I thank everyone for participating and dropping the questions in here. We have some really good questions. One question that kind of popped up is, what suggestions do any of the panelists have to offer providers of higher education in the prison programs in constructing pathways that they sponsor traditional college campuses for formerly incarcerated people that are typically excluded? Like I can read it again and paraphrase if you need me to.
Yes, if you could just, I'm sorry. All right,
Yeah, sorry. So pretty much what suggestions do you all have for higher education providers and in prison programs to make pathways for people who are formerly incarcerated to enter into the educational system?
sure. So that's a great question. And thank you. I want to start by saying thank you, Majid and Dante, who are two incredible scholars within our program and team members as well. Very inspiring stories, and thank you. So I would say I've been dropping resources to answer the question because some of the questions require longer answers. I would say that the STEM Ops coalition that we created is a place that you can get resources on how to build STEM programming. I would say the National Conference for Higher Education in Prison and the AHEP Association has some resources for individuals in building those pathways and programs. So I would answer the question by saying just to refer to those two resources. I would open it to Majid or Dante if you have anything additional. And we can provide those resources to you in the chat and follow up as well.
Okay. All right. So another question is, if employers have successfully gotten around ban the box with background checks, how can we ensure colleges don't do the same? Now, it's a question you can answer in this time point, but
if employers have gotten to ban the boxing, how is it, or ban the box, how
they got around it? Mm-hmm.
I've gotten around it.
Yeah, and what would stop colleges from doing the same thing?
Yeah, I could imagine if I think the question is referring to, there's some data around that there's been some negative effects of ban the box on employment, because without having the question, some employers are just racially profiling. So they'll just inherently do background checks on Black folks and exclude them in that manner. One, that's against the law, you know, so they're breaking the law. And, you know, I think the question is, we get this question, Majid, when we, you know, Majid has helped a lot with the ban the box. So Majid, please offer your thoughts on ban the box on college applications. It's really a question of, we need to ban the box and stop racially profiling individuals. So, you know, there's a question of, that's just a question of systemic racism, that those individuals are screening Black individuals and screening them out. I don't know if you want to add anything, Majid.
No, that's good. And I'm not too familiar with the ways around it. I know in Colorado, we've banned the box on both college applications as well as employment applications, and have not, through any representatives or senators in Colorado, heard of any issues regarding that here in Colorado. But I do know, I mean, through my experiences on applying for graduate schools, I have had to encounter telling my story and controlling that narrative and being able to explain everything that's happened in my history, and some for good and some for bad. Mostly it's a negative experience. Mostly it results in reliving that type of trauma and having to once again try to prove yourself. So to weigh the good and bad, it seems like it's to ban that box on college applications for both hopefully public and private universities is the direction we need to be moving towards.
And there's a numbers aspect to it too. Employers, you know, at the undergrad level, there's just too many applicants to do that type of technique. Whereas employers, if they get 10, 20 applicants, they might be able to do that. But with 10,000 applicants, you just can't do that.
And I think we have time maybe for one or two more questions. So this question, first, they say it's a wonderful event and your stories are also inspiring, and they thank you for sharing. But the question is, as an undergrad and aspiring physician, how does this person advocate and promote change within this area of increasing educational attainment for formerly or currently incarcerated folks?
I could speak to that. I would say, you know, by doing exactly what you're doing today, joining these events, finding out what's going on in these communities, you know, keeping a tab on the thought leaders with like Dr. Stanley and the other thought leaders that you'll, you know, get the opportunity to hear them speak on this panel, and, you know, figure out ways that you can use your skills and your social capital to help further push the mission. You know, whether you're a good organizer, you know, where you can help with logistics or whatever skills or qualities you can help bring to different programs to help them, you know, be more efficient and get to that end goal of making sure that all people that are serving time have access to a quality education. And also, get out there and find out, what bills are currently on the table. And if you can speak to that and like offer your voice in those moments, that's also a great way for you to like, contribute. It's a community effort, and we all got to realize we're in this together.
Great. I have a question from Len Rubenstein here, snuck up in the question and answer. His question is, what would you recommend for places like Johns Hopkins to do to enable higher education opportunities for formerly incarcerated people?
So I will quickly answer by saying Johns Hopkins needs a college and prison program. And I've been working with the provost office to bring that. There are a number of other institutions at Johns Hopkins caliber that are already in the game, and Hopkins really needs to catch up. So we would love your support by, filling out the survey that the feedback will ask that question. But I think one thing that they can do and that they should be doing and that they're behind on is having a college and prison program.
I also want to second that, not only for Hopkins, for the Colorado School of Mines, where I'm attending, for Santa Barbara, Chicago, Princeton is already doing it. There's a lot of institutions that once, a lot of institutions were already offering college programs when those who are incarcerated could apply for financial aid. Once that was taken away, so were the programs. So trying to get back to how it was before 1994 and better is what we should be striving for in totality.
Okay, we have at 12:57. Do you want to take one more question, or do you want to?
I think we could take one more question and, maybe just go a minute or so after if folks stay long with us.
Okay, and this final question, or what are your thoughts about prison abolition movement versus reform? And the person understand that both can happen at the same time, but they want to kind of get your opinion and thoughts on both of them.
I can start by saying that I often mention to our DOC partners and other partners that it's almost as if, we very much think and feel that abolition is the way to go, that the prison system and, the things that I mentioned in my talk really show that we need to kind of just tear it all down. But at the same time, we understand that we sort of need to be Harriet Tubman's and creating this kind of underground railroad. And to do that, just as she did, you have to partner with certain institutions. So we have to become partners with Department of Corrections in order to help people to provide programming. So it's very challenging, and we kind of walk a very tight line between pushing for policies that are, looking to kind of more so, be very forceful in change. We want change to happen quickly, but then at the same time partnering with those institutions because we need to be doing something to make sure people are getting out. So it's a difficult question. It's a great question, but difficult question.
To add to that, I'm for prison abolish movements. Why? Because through study, I've learned that there's other models to judicial system that we can follow. Finland being a great example there, where the focus is actually on reintegrating prisoners back into society and rehabilitating them, and that's something I don't feel is currently present in our system. And a reason I can say that is, while actually being enrolled into college courses and seeing all the issues and barriers that the directors and the professors had to go through in order to, provide the instructions to the classrooms, that being not having access to computers and, having to improvise with the way that they give their lessons, right? But yet on the other side of that, I work for MCE, which is Maryland Correctional Enterprises, where we do all of the business cards, letterheads, and envelopes for all of the state of Maryland. And when it comes to operating that shop, there's no problems at all. There's internet down there that, of course, only the sergeants can use, but there's internet. There's $1 million machines that you have the people who are serving time using and maintaining, graphic designers back there, creating all of the advertisements that we all get to see and enjoy in those particular moments that you see all around Maryland. So I feel that, it's time to really think about, abolishing the system and reconstructing it in a way that would better serve the community.
And so with that, I believe we are out of time. To that end of what Dante mentioned about the other countries, Vera, I posted on one of the questions, Vera has something called Reimagining Prisons. I encourage you to check that out. It really talks a little bit about what Dante was mentioning. I wish we had more time with you, but that is it for today. I can't thank my fellow panelists and moderator enough for presenting with me today. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first of 3, so please mark your calendars for the next 2. The next one is coming up at the beginning of March, so that information will be sent out. For the questions that were unanswered, we will try to respond in a follow-up to those individuals. And please connect with us through the booklet. We have contact information and also ways for you to get involved if you so wish to. So again, thank you to Hopkins for providing this platform, and thank you to all that attended today, and thank you to our panelists and moderator.
Thank you. Right, and that concludes our session.
Bye, everyone.